Got a lot of pictures of both young adults, male, female, so we knew we had a reproducing population of mountain lions. We had somewhat of an understanding of where the lions were. They were using roads as travel corridors, they were using areas around springs. We documented 6 individual lions within a 90 square kilometer area over a 2-month period. With the data we had from the camera traps, we knew we had a reproducing population of mountain lions on the site, so we wanted to understand their movements better, and so we took it to the next level and worked with USGS, who contracted with Brian Jansen to come and capture mountain lions for us, so that we could put the radio transmitters on them and track them with radio transmitters and really understand their movements and their habitat use and their diet as well, using the radio telemetry.
Most things in life you can eventually, with a lot of practice, master. You just cannot master catching lions. Every lion seems to have a whole bunch of aces up their sleeve that they've always got the upper hand, and it's dang near luck to catch one. I'm Brian Jansen, and I'm a mountain lion and bighorn sheep biologist. So I've been camped out here for the last 18 days on the Nevada National Security Site in a region called Rainier Mesa, tracking lions, looking for fresh sign, setting traps, and just trying to find them and catch them. They're pretty difficult to even find, let alone catch. There's 2 ways I capture mountain lions. I use foot snares, and I place those on trails that I know mountain lions are going to use, either from recent sign or just my estimation. And then we also use the hounds. So on a normal day, what we would do is check our traps in the morning, and if we don't find anything in the traps, I'll go to places where I think a lion might have gone, or places that lions frequent, and park, and then we usually walk a loop about 10 miles, me and the dogs, and I'm looking for tracks at the same time the dogs are sniffing for lion scent. Sometimes I can't see the tracks because the ground is hard, but they leave scent, and the dogs will pick up the scent. I will let the dogs scent trail the lion as far as they can, and I will follow the dogs on foot. And in the course of a day, they might lose the track 4 or 5 times, and I'll have to help them find it. And we keep going. While we're doing that, the lion is sleeping in their daybed because they're nocturnal and they walk around all night. And so we're following the scent trail of what they did the previous night. And when we get to the lion's bed, the lion's not there anymore because he heard the dogs coming, and they get up and move. When we hit that spot, that scent is so fresh, the dogs blow out of there fast and usually catch the lion within a quarter to half a mile. When the dogs start putting pressure on the lion will find a place to seek refuge. They'll either climb up a tree, go down in a hole, or get out on the edge of a cliff, some place that they can protect themselves from the dogs. And then I tie the dogs up because I don't want any dog to fight with the lion, and then I dart the lion and immobilize it. I protect it from falling while it's being immobilized. Once it's immobilized, I bring it to a safe location and then take whatever the project wants.
The tranquilized lions are weighed. The scientists look for injuries. They take body measurements. They look for parasites and sample for evidence of disease. They examine their teeth. They draw blood and attach an ear tag. Finally, they fit the lion with a satellite GPS tracking collar. The rest of the research begins after that. They release the animal on site and begin to follow as the satellite data pours in.
Hey guys, come on.
The 2 lions I just recently collared are both adult males. One was about 5 to 6 years old, one was about 3 to 4 years old. They weigh about the same, 125 and 130 pounds. The project will be able to track these lions wherever they go for the next 2 years, I believe. So one of the things we found in the past is that these lions just make tremendous movements. One lion I collared on the site went, in a matter of a week, went 70 miles to the west across Death Valley. Killed deer over in the Cottonwood Mountains, crossed Death Valley back, hunted around in the grapevines, went up by Goldfield, comes back to the site, back across Death Valley. You could never do that kind of research without these satellite collars. I mean, the things that we're learning and the extent to which these lions are roaming just far surpasses what we ever knew before.
GPS collars that permit tracking are also a crucial tool for studying bighorn sheep.
Today, we are putting GPS collars on bighorn sheep in the Nevada National Security Site.
You guys back to the airport afterwards, right?
Yeah. This is a new population of bighorn sheep that we just found existed a couple of years ago, and we need to have information about where the sheep are, how many there are, possibly their movement patterns.
Our gunner is the guy in the front seat generally, and he leans out and shoots the gun to catch the animal. Usually that's the first animal that he'll net, and then the mugger will hop out of the back seat and he'll go out, he'll restrain the animal, and he'll work that one up, while me and the gunner will go out and catch another one. Flying a helicopter, especially a small single-engine helicopter in 30-mile-an-hour winds, can be challenging at times, especially when you're working in steep terrain and you're trying to get an animal to go to a certain spot where you can safely make a capture on it, and your crew can get out and work it up where it needs to be too. We obtain biological data, including blood samples and nasal swabs, and they'll be able to look at those samples and test them for different types of sickness the sheep might have. But a very important part of the project was placing tracking collars on these animals.
And then they attach the collar and let the animal up, and they're done. And it's pretty fast. So these are the collars that we put on sheep, and we put these same collars on cougars. We have the GPS VHF unit down here, and then we have satellite uplink. Here's the antenna for the satellite uplink. At the end of the study, this little mechanism has a charge in it, and it goes off and breaks off, and the collar falls off the animal. We then go out and retrieve the collar.
That satellite GPS collar is especially indispensable if for no other reason that we're on the Nevada National Security Site. We don't have ready access to this site. And what that collar is going to do, it's going to uplink with satellites. It's going to enable us to have real-time or near real-time positional data over seasons, over years. And that's going to give us very valuable movement information.
So we look at differences in habitat use throughout the day. So we know areas where sheep particularly like to forage and where they might be bedding. We're hoping to look at lamb bed sites so that the test site has an idea of important areas for the sheep population on the landscape. Sheep select for cliffs and steep, rugged areas at night, of course, when they're bedding down, which is also the time that mountain lions tend to go hunting.
Predator-prey relationships, they're always important, and they change over time. What we see on the Nevada National Security Site with respect to large-bodied predators like mountain lions impacting potentially desert bighorn sheep, we also have to think about another big game component here, and that would be mule deer. We do have a mule deer resource on Department of Energy lands.
Mule deer are the most common prey of cougars on the Nevada National Security Site. Tracking the collared cougars has clarified which animals they prey on and how widely they roam.
We have captured to date 9 animals. We put radio transmitters on them, and they operate with satellite, so they take locations at pre-programmed intervals. Usually it's about every 6 hours or every 4 hours, so multiple times a day. And we get coordinates for those locations that are emailed to us, and then we can pull those up in GIS and look at their movements.
We can find out when they've made a kill. What happens is lions seem to never stop moving. They're They're really quite amazing. They're always moving around, and normally the points that are 4 hours apart, the GPS locations 4 hours apart, they might be a mile apart from each other. So the lion's moving around all night long, doing whatever it is they're doing. And when they kill something, it takes 2 to 3 days for them to eat that item, because it's a large item, it's a deer-sized animal. So all of a sudden they go from moving a mile every 4 hours to staying in the same spot for 2 days. And what happens is those GPS points overlap each other, and we call that a cluster. It's a cluster of points. So what we do is, after the lion leaves that cluster of points, we go and see what they were doing. And ordinarily, the only thing that's there is a dead animal. And so we're finding anything from gray foxes up to deer-sized animals by doing that.
There's a seasonal difference as well. They prefer mule deer, that's their main prey. And what we found is that the prey, the mule deer, will concentrate on the higher elevations of the site. Rainier Mesa, Paiute Mesa, where there's a lot of forested cover, as well as sagebrush meadows, and that's perfect habitat for the mule deer. And so the lions will congregate around that summer range, which is concentrated. During the wintertime, the snow comes, it gets cold, and so the mule deer will move off those high elevation habitats to the lower elevation habitats. There's just a large area, and so the deer get dispersed over very large areas. This also brings the lions down into bighorn sheep habitat, really rugged, steep country canyons and that. So the lions move off to follow the deer, but then come into contact with the sheep. And so what we're seeing is a seasonal change in diet. They'll take primarily mule deer in the summer, fall, and then they'll shift to mainly bighorn sheep during the winter and spring.
But what we think is going to happen here, potentially anyway, is that we'll see a little nucleus of sheep maybe expand into what could be considered a viable little population on Department of Energy land.
One of the other reasons that we wanted to do this study was the Department of Energy is mandated by law to document potential radiation exposure from test site activities to the off-site public. One of those potential pathways is wildlife. So game animals such as bighorn sheep, mountain lions, or mule deer can potentially come on site, eat some contaminated material, and then go off-site and then get shot and eaten by a hunter. That's one of the potential exposure pathways. And so we wanted to understand those movements both on-site and off-site. And we also wanted to identify what the radiological burden was of these animals. All of the sampling that has been done over the years has found really that from the residual radiation we're not seeing really any effects. And we actually go out and study the plants and animals that are using some of those contaminated areas. All of that information is put into our annual site-wide environmental report that explains the radiation doses and stuff. And again, like I say, we're not seeing levels that are harmful to the animals or people that would be eating those animals.
As science goes, this is a particularly elegant study. An impressive array of tools, skills, and expertise have led to insightful results on the health and life habits of wildlife here. This work is part of the Nevada National Security Site obligation to monitor and protect the local ecosystem.
I just like sheep. They're spectacular. I just love working on sheep. I mean, if you're out and you watch them, they're just amazing. They're surviving in the desert in the middle of nowhere. They walk on these little steep, tiny little cliffs and walls, and they're just gorgeous.
But Brian Janis was amazing. He knows mountain lions. He knows how they move through the environment. Without him, we wouldn't have any animals to study.
They have a difficult life. If you think about it, these lions are walking around 5 to 10 miles every night looking for something to kill with their teeth and their front legs. Once they hit 10 years old, their teeth are pretty well wore out. They don't usually live a lot longer than that. In fact, the vast majority of them never even reach 7 to 9 years old.
I like working with bighorn sheep because it's a native animal. It historically occurred throughout the state. There are so many questions about bighorn that it takes science, good researchers doing good work to answer these questions.
It's a team effort to obtain the correct data so they can make the correct decisions on how to manage those animals so that we can maintain the resource.
It is a special feeling, I suppose, knowing that you're doing good stuff. It's a good feeling. It feels like you did work that really counts for something.
Tomorrow I'm gonna pull up some of my gear, cameras, trail transmitters, some traps, and then I'm gonna pick up camp and head home.
Let's go. Vamos.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
I was born here in Las Vegas in 1913.
Born in Las Vegas in 1936.
August 1931.
October 1953.
Born here on February 22nd.
I've been here since the first day of 1950.
Came to Las Vegas in 1949.
I came to Las Vegas in 1953.
October 3rd, 1949.
1952 September.
I moved here in 1955.
Came to Las Vegas in 1943.
In 1961.
I was born here in Clark County before Las Vegas.
Myth that Siegel started Las Vegas. I don't like that at all. I think he was a blight on Las Vegas.
Well, first of all, Bugsy Siegel didn't start the first hotel in Las Vegas, and if we can kill that myth.
It was the third hotel. The first hotel was the El Rancho Vegas, a forward-looking guy, Tommy Hall. Second was the Last Frontier, and the third one was the Flamingo.
I met Benjamin Siegel one time. Very, very quiet, because I met him in the sheriff's office, and he came in with I guess an attorney with him, and stood there and talked to a couple of the people in the sheriff's office, and then I was introduced to him. Then he just he finished his business and he left.
And my dad, early in the practice, acquired an infamous client, and that was Bugsy Siegel. Not long after that, my dad received a buzz from his secretary, and she said, "Mr. Weiner, there's a Mr. Siegel here to see you." And my dad said, "Gee, when you're from Pittsburgh, everybody's a Siegel or a Levitt or something." It didn't ring with him. And then Ben Siegel came through the door and said he wanted to hire him. Now, this was in the 40s, and they agreed that my dad would work for him once Siegel said that he wanted my father, although Dad tried to convince him there were 16 other attorneys in town. Now keep that in mind, considering how many there are now. And he said, "They're more experienced." He said, "You don't get it. I don't ever want to see you on the other side of the courtroom again."
Bugsy was always very dapper, very well-dressed, very precise, and he had the steeliest blue eyes you ever saw. And when he looked at you, he looked right into your soul. Very polite, always a gentleman.
You see, everybody today calls him Bugsy, but you didn't call him Bugsy to his face. If you did, you're liable to get your head knocked off. His name was Benjamin Siegel, and that's how he expected to be addressed. And today everybody calls him Bugsy Siegel, but if he was still around, there were not many people would be calling him Bugsy Siegel. He was Benjamin Siegel.
Dad happened to call him Bugsy once and he blew up, but he said, "Get out here now, I have to show you something." My dad was 5'6". Siegel was probably 5'10" or 5'11". He took him into the Oregon building and he said, "Walk across the room." My dad walked across the room and got to the other side. He didn't get the point. That made Siegel angry because he was trying to demonstrate something and it didn't work. My dad was 5'6". Siegel walked, and in midpoint, he bumped his head on a beam because the ceilings were too low. Then my dad got the point.
There wasn't much here in terms of Epicurean food. Mr. Siegel would come out to the Green Shack